Grace here, welcome back to my channel. Since tomorrow is a special Memorial Day, the Holocaust Memorial Day, I thought that this week's lockdown literature would be a little bit special, a little bit different, because I did read a book that very much relates to this very horrible of events that we shouldn't forget about. It is the Diary of Anne Frank. I got this book from my auntie because she knew I was running out of literature quite early on in lockdown and came and delivered me some books, and this was one of the ones she got me. It has a photo of Anne Frank on the front, and it looks, I think it's supposed to be based on the design of her actual diary that she had. And it does say in the front of the book that a lot of the names were changed in a few editions. So the parents' names were changed, the family members they stayed with, the other people that they stayed with were changed, and that some of the words that were translated were kind of abridged at first, but I think this is, most modern versions of Anne Frank's diary do have a lot of the original words that she was trying to say, at least translated from Austrian? German? I know she was from Austria, but I think she was mostly being raised German. But it's very appropriate for the horrible things that happened because she became part of it, basically. So if you don't know who Anne Frank is, I don't really blame you. Oh my gosh, I've just realised I've been saying that she's Austrian. I think she's Danish, because they kept saying about how she was hiding. Either that or she was just staying in the Netherlands. Oh gosh, it's been too long since I read this. I read this back in the late spring of 2020, early summer, so the time when we were allowed to have our grandparents in our gardens for the Brits here. And if you don't know who Anne Frank is, she was a girl who lived through the Second World War, and she wrote a diary about her situation because she was Jewish, and I'm not going to say the name of the people that oppressed her because I don't want this video to get flagged. They're not nice people from the German army. We're chasing after her family because the family was Jewish, and because they didn't like the Jewish and they wanted to do bad things to the Jewish people. So they went on the run, staying in attics, hiding out, having to eat rations, having to turn the lights out at a certain point of the night, having to keep curtains shut, having to stay quiet, having to whisper so that they can't be heard. It was very harrowing, definitely. She was at times she was very good at telling her story. At other times she was a bit light on detail, but she would fill it in later with extra notes that were added to explain what the situation was with her. So she had to stay with her whole family, as I said, and also other people who were escaping that were in a similar situation to her. And there is a little bit of a romance. I can't remember the name of the guy that she liked, but there was a guy that she liked, and she tried to spark a romance, but because of how bad her situation was, I don't think that was the main thing on her mind. And if you think that was the main thing on her mind, then you... But yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anyone if no one knows how Anne Frank's story ended. So if you don't want it spoiled, then just skip ahead a little bit. Her diary ends with the family getting captured and taken to concentration camps. And she didn't come out of that concentration camp alive. It's a pretty dark story, and she's only supposed to be about 13, 14, I think. She was very young, and she wrote all of this down, all of the thoughts that were going through her head, all of the things that she wanted to say, all of the things that she couldn't say, all of the things that were just going around your head in that kind of situation. And being stuck in lockdown, I kind of related to her a little bit with the whole having to stay in one place and not being able to go outside, and sometimes looking out the window and wondering what it would be like being outside. it was kind of, I don't want to seem, I could kind of see where she was coming from with some of the stuff that she was saying. Yeah, it was a very good read. I definitely recommend it if you enjoy the more true stories about people. So since it's technically non-fiction because it did all happen. So this is the one that's called the definitive. It's called the definitive version, and it was edited by someone called Otto H. Frank and Miriam Pressler. Otto, I believe, if I remember correctly, Otto was her father. So when they went away, she gave them the copies of what she wrote in her diary. They edited it heavily, and then it got translated into lots of other languages so other people could read them. And to this day, her writings are some of the most poignant works in literature from that time ever. So it was a tough read at times, because sometimes you'd read something and be like, oh gosh, if only she'd known, and things like that. But other times you kind of liked how she had hope. For a while she did have hope for things to be better, and then after a while she did become quite pessimistic, and you really can't blame her for being pessimistic about her situation. A lot of the things she said you wouldn't expect someone of her age to talk about or know about, but for saying she was a girl of that time, she wasn't a product of her times much of the time in the book. A lot of the time she would say things that you wouldn't expect a girl of that age or of that time or of that nationality to say about her situation or about her life and things. And it's quite poignant to see that a lot of the time people of her age are portrayed as being either on the brink of turning into teenagers, so like either they're portrayed by much older actors in movies and TV shows and things, or they're portrayed by much younger people, because people don't think of that generation or of people in that age group being very developed and things. But we don't give children enough credit, because a lot of children do have grown-up thoughts and grown-up thought processes. They just don't get to express them a lot because of the way that they're raised, or the way that they're told that they shouldn't talk about certain things, or that they should be shielded from things. And this poor girl, she wasn't shielded by any means. She saw all of the nastiness, all of the horror, all of the fear of being taken away in the middle of the night, all of those nights where you just have to try and breathe as quietly as possible so that no one would hear you, the raids. It's quite dark at times, but it's such a mixed read because it's the diary of someone. It's not one genre. Yes, it's basically a biography that's been a little bit edited and things, but it has romance, it has turmoil, it has dark moments, it has happy moments. You just can't gauge where it sits on the scale because it's a diary. It's called Anne Frank, the Diary of a Young Girl, but you read this diary and think you're looking at a young woman. And at times you are, because she's forced to grow up beyond her years because of her situation where she has to do all of these things that she didn't do before, or try and keep up with her studies even though she can't go to school. Yeah, because she couldn't go to school, often she would try and educate herself with all her books that she still had, late at night when everyone was asleep, just so that she could stay educated despite her horrible situation, just so that she had something to occupy her mind. It's deep, it's dark, it's entertaining at times, and it's something that you should read at least once in your life. It's like those books that you get told to read at school, like Animal Farm and Frankenstein, or Romeo and Juliet, or A Christmas Carol, or The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Oh my gosh, my voice is going. But you should read it at least once in your life, boy, girl, whatever. It's something that you should read if you're old enough to understand some of those concepts, or even if you're not old enough to read some of those concepts and you just want a harder read. it's a good book. It's one that I definitely recommend if you want to know history about the Second World War in that time, if you want to know about the space of 1942 to 1944 and what happened in other countries, because we don't learn about what happened in other countries in school. A lot of the time we don't hear about it. We just hear about what happened in England or sometimes in France, depending on where the battles would take place. It's quite interesting to see it from someone else's perspective from that time, of a younger age and not on the front line, but at home or even just in hiding and things. There are lots of other stories about Jewish girls escaping from the not so nice people. There's one that I can think of that I do have a copy of, but I haven't read yet. The story of a girl called Corrie ten Boom. She's also in this collection of books called 10 Girls Who Changed the World. And she was either Jewish or she was a Christian, I can't quite remember, but she also had to escape from the not so nice people during the Second World War. And it sounds childish me saying that, but if I say the other word then I might get flagged, so, you know. There are lots of stories of people from that time, and some of them are fictitious, some of them are true, and it's just really interesting to see about how they got through it or how they didn't quite get through it. Anyway, sorry to be a little bit of a downer with this video, but it is important to remember what tomorrow is about and why we memorialise it and why we have to remember what happened so that it doesn't ever happen again. Anyway, I will see you next week with another lockdown literature video, hopefully. I might start doing a monthly thing where I pick a month and turn it into a certain theme, because I've noticed that some of my books that I read during lockdown and just in general have fit into certain categories. Some of them very specific ones that I don't know why they were from that category, but I ended up reading them anyway. We'll see. So I will see you next week for my next lockdown literature. Bye guys!